Welcome to Bonhill Geography. Today we'll look at hard engineering strategies for rivers. Today we'll explore various methods to manage and reduce flood risk, including gabions, embankments, floodgates, channel straightening, weirs, flood relief channels, dams and reservoirs. Lots to choose from. First up we have gabions, or gabions. Now these are wire mesh cages filled with rocks or other materials, often used to stabilise the river banks and prevent erosion. Now these help to reduce flood risk by absorbing and dissipating the energy of flowing water. They help prevent erosion and stabilise the river bank. Contrary to common belief, they are quite ineffective at storing excess floodwater because the water can slowly trickle through the rocks and still lead to a flood. But they are going to stop the river from increasing in size and potentially decrease its velocity. Now despite these setbacks, the advantages of gabions include the minimal visual impact blended with natural surroundings and cost effectiveness, durability, and can even promote vegetation growth, which can further enhance the habitat for wildlife. You can imagine all these nooks and crannies supporting more life than a sheer concrete wall. However, they can be unsightly if they are not properly maintained. They require regular maintenance and can disrupt local ecosystems during the installation. You can see a really corroded steel wire behind us here, which is what will happen to them over time, leading to rusty river banks. Next we have embankments. Now these are raised barriers constructed along river banks to contain flood water. Now embankments reduce flood risk by increasing the river's capacity to hold water. Thus it helps to prevent overflow. As a result, they protect communities from flooding and can be relatively inexpensive to construct, and as a result can also create new habitats designed with nature in mind, but this is only if we use embankments like the ones seen here. Most of the time they are concrete or repurposed levees from the lower course. On the downside, they can restrict access to the river, particularly for things like shipping and boats. They have relatively high maintenance costs, where if they are not maintained they will break, just like in New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina, and can lead to increased erosion downstream. Floodgates are barriers that can be opened or closed to control flood water or water flow. Now these help to reduce flood risk by allowing controlled release of water during high flow periods. Now as a result, they provide a really high level of flood protection, helping to protect valuable infrastructure, and can be designed to minimise the impact on local ecosystems, even having floodwater stored behind them to create new wetlands, for example. However, as we can see here, they can be quite visually intrusive, so not very nice to look at, and they're expensive to install and maintain. As a result, they can also disrupt natural water flow and disrupt aquatic habitats. For example, fish might be having a lovely day in the area behind the floodgate before it closes, essentially limiting where they can go and what they can do. Our next hard engineering strategy involves channel straightening. This is making the river's course straighter and faster flowing. That reduces flood risk in the area that it is installed in. As a result, reducing the likelihood of overflow because the water is moving away from the area much quicker. Now these straighter river channels can help to reduce flood risk in urban areas and can improve navigation and land use, as a result reducing sediment buildup. Interestingly, lots of these almost look like canals, and we see them in many locations across the UK. Try and have a look and see if you can spot some channel straightening taking place near the coast. This is so larger vessels can move up things like estuaries. However, as you can imagine, channel straightening will increase flood risk downstream, and as a result has a high initial cost and can lead to habitat loss and increased erosion. The reason it leads to higher flood risk downstream is the water is getting there faster. As a result, there is less time to deal with floodwater itself, or less time for it to sink into the ground. So they have a shorter lag time in the downstream areas. Next up, we have weirs. These are barriers built across rivers to control water flow and levels. Now these help to reduce flood risk by regulating water flow and maintaining consistent water levels. As we can see in the video behind us, this regularly leads to higher levels of water upstream. As a result, because more water is upstream, the levels of the river are lower downstream. This helps to reduce flood risk. Now weirs can help to again create recreational areas. They generate In some areas, electric power. What is important here is not in all areas, only where dams have been installed, and can use improve water quality by further aerating the water, helping to improve water security for many different people. On the downside, they can be a barrier to fish migration for things like salmon. They have quite high construction and maintenance costs, and can alter natural river flow regimes and sediment transport. As a result, it means that nutrients could decrease further downstream, when normally there'll be lots more for plants alongside the river to use. Next, we have flood relief channels. Now, these are artificial channels created to divert excess water away from vulnerable areas. A really good example is the Jubilee River in southern England. Now, this is a 11.6 kilometre long channel which was constructed to reduce the risk of flooding in Windsor and Eton by diverting water from the River Thames. As you can imagine, Windsor and Eton are very affluent areas, hence why this was constructed. Now, we actually see these flood relief channels all over the place in America. But the advantages of these flood relief channels include protecting communities and infrastructure and integrating them into urban planning. This is going to also provide areas for excess water runoff to drain into. This can create new habitats and green spaces, unless, like the American example here, has been implemented, where we see massive flood drains, as they're called over there, with lots of concrete. However, they do require significant land use and have high construction and maintenance costs. As a result, they can also disrupt existing ecosystems, where areas that naturally flood no longer do. Again, this idea of preventing any new nutrients from entering an ecosystem. Next, we have dams. These are large structures built across rivers to control water flow and create new reservoirs. Now, Calgreen Reservoir in northern England is an excellent example. This was built between 1967 and 1971. Now, the benefits of this is it supplies water to the industries of Teesside and regulates water flow during dry conditions. During wet conditions, it can hold lots of water back that would otherwise be downstream. As previously stated, they reduce flood risk by storing that excess water during heavy rainfall and gradually releasing it. This again, as previously stated, reduces flood risk downstream. Unless, of course, the dam breaks, which happened a few years ago. Dams and reservoirs provide water supplies, recreational opportunities. For example, many of us in Yorkshire would have had a walk or a cycle around a reservoir. They generate hydroelectric power if installed in many locations and can help to create new habitats and wetlands. However, as we can see by the construction behind us, dams can displace many local communities, with a famous example being in Wales. They can have high construction costs and maintenance costs, and can even alter ecosystems and, as you can imagine, block fish migration. No fish is going to scale a large dam, unless of course a fish ladder is actually installed. Have a Google. Here's a summary of everything discussed in today's video. Please feel free to pause here to improve your notes. Now, there's technically really two types of questions that could come, as well as the evaluate question that we looked at in soft engineering. My first example is a 4-mark question, which says explain how X helps to reduce flood risk. So sometimes we'll be asked to identify what the strategy is, and then explain why that is leading to reduction of flood risk. This could be either on a map, which would be very difficult, or this could be on a photo. Number 2 says, suggest why hard engineering strategies create both social and economic advantages and disadvantages. So it's essentially an evaluate style question. Please do pause here and have a try at these questions now, before looking on at my model answers. Thank you for watching Bonhill Geography. Catch you in the next video.